Today I'm going to take you through the process of drafting and sewing this iconic summer dress to your own body measurements. This is inspired by a look from Marilyn Monroe she wore in a 1955 shoot. I won't show it here for copyright reasons, but Google Marilyn Monroe Polka Dot dress and you'll see it for yourself. To begin, you will need your bodice block. If you don't already have one, don't worry, I have a tutorial here showing you how to draft your own, and you can then use it as a starting point for any bodice pattern you make. The link is above, watch that and then come back here. As always, trace your bodice block to your waist point onto fresh paper. I am going to be working on a smaller scale so that it is clearer to see the details on the camera, but you obviously do this to full size. Begin by measuring yourself from your neck down to where you want the dress neckline to begin. You can go lower if you want more cleavage, higher for more coverage. If you are unsure, go higher and then chop off the excess fabric when you make your first mock-up. Pull this line across horizontally. Ignore the dart, we'll get to this later. Next, measure from the waistline up to under the breasts. So this is the point that the gathered up puff section will start to bag out over the boobs. You want this to hit approximately your bra bridge. If you go too low, it can make your boobs look saggy. If you go too high, you'll get a shelf-like appearance and not have much movement. Again, pull this line across horizontally to the dart point. Measure the dart leg to the line and copy this onto the other side of the dart leg. At the back, measure from the nape of your neck to the top of the back bodice. I always do my backs high enough to cover my bra band plus a little ease. Make this horizontal towards the side seam, stopping at the dart. Under the arm, measure down by 1 inch. As this is a strappy bodice, we want that gap between the armpits and the dress. Join with a curved line to the previous line. This top area will be discarded. Copy the side seam measurement of 1 inch to the front side seam. We will follow the curve of the original armhole seam for our shape, but bring it to the top neckline we formed earlier. Measure from your centre at your neckline position across to where you want your strap to connect to your bodice top. Remember not to measure the dart. Again, I use my bra as a reference point here so that my end strap of the dress sits around the strap area of my bra. Measure your strap point to the side of your breasts. This is again where the gathered bust area will begin. I placed it slightly outwards of my bra underwire. When drafting, your bra is a great reference point for measurements, and it's why it's always important to wear the underwear you intend to wear with the final garment during the fitting stage. Curve to the underbust line, following the general shape of your underwire. Don't have this top bodice section cutting off the side of your boobs, it will distort the shaping. You want the perimeter to sit flat to your ribcage and the gathered bit to balloon over your boobs. The larger your boobs, the bigger the top section will appear in comparison to the bridge. I'll now add my fold labels at the centre front and centre back and begin to name my pattern pieces. It's important at this point to add some notches, as it allows us to align our pattern correctly during construction. Once done, cut each section out. Now we will address the top bodice part. First we will label the central fold, and then as this part has gathers, we're going to incorporate the darts into the gathering. We want to add a lot more gathering than just this dart area. To do that, we will use the slash and spread method. Divide this into equal parts, spread them out evenly, and stick them on fresh paper. As we're dealing with straight edges here, we can make it much simpler. Cut off the end-shaped section. We will retain all this detail as it matches with our other parts. On fresh paper, draw around it. Now place the excess as the other end. I added 10 centimetres into my bodice front. You can add as much as you desire. The more you add, the fuller this section will look. Remember that we are working on the half, so this will actually work out as 20 centimetres extra across the bust. So here is the final bodice section pattern. Ensure you have all grain lines marked and notches. Trace this onto fresh paper and add your seam allowance before proceeding to cut it out. I am making this in a blue ditzy print polycotton from Fabric Guys. I'll include a link below. I cut the bodice first and left the skirt for later. I also cut the lining for the bodice in a plain white polycotton, and for the bodice bridge section I cut it in a fusible interfacing. This should add structure to that area and make it firmer. If you want a really easy wear soft summer dress, skip this step. The bridge section of the bodice was joined to the corresponding interfacing section. When you attach interfacing, use the seam setting on your iron and hold it over without touching for a few seconds. Start in the middle and work your way to the outer sections in turn. This shrinks that cotton fabric similar to how a pre-wash does on your main fabric. If you find you're getting an uneven fabric after your interfacing is applied, usually that is your interfacing shrinking up, bunching up the main fabric in the process. By doing this steam step, it will prevent that. Once you've done that, return to the middle and press down with your iron. Follow your instructions you got with your interfacing for timings, but do the middle, then lift and work outwards, pressing down again. Never slide. You don't want to drag your iron over. Lift and press centre to the edges. Also, I find it's good practice to let the item fully cool before handling it. A good 30 minutes for all that glue to truly cure and prevent the two layers peeling apart. Beginning construction, I connected the side front to the middle front, remembering to match all notches first and work from there. I then sewed with a 1 cm seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and end. For both sides I worked from top to bottom, sticking to the same direction. Then I pressed the seam open. This was repeated on the centre back to the side back sections. Again, every seam was pressed open. The lining was constructed exactly the same way. The bodice top was aligned with wrong sides together. Then the exterior edge was sewn around with a 0.5 cm seam allowance. I pressed it nice and flat before proceeding. The next step is to gather up the bottom edge between the notches. Use a regular straight stitch on your sewing machine, but increase the stitch length to one of the higher settings. Sew between the notches we made on the lower edge with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Don't tie off at the beginning and end. Repeat this at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Pull on the 2 bobbin threads from either side, gathering down your fabric to the length of your bridge section. Work carefully, you don't want to snap these threads, and ease and slip the fabric down, spreading it out evenly. Now it does help to place a pin at the centre point before you begin, because it can be hard to locate that once gathered, and we need that mark for later. Keep working, sometimes it can help to go smaller and then distribute it out evenly to the right length. Align this right sides together to the curved upper edge of the bodice bridge section. Match the notches, the ends and the centre point. Then pin and adjust all them gathers between these points nice and even. Sew along this edge with just short of a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Once done, turn this out and go along the edge and check you have no tucks or gathers in the bridge section. If so, correct that before proceeding. If you want to try on to check the fitting, the best next step is to attach the bodice front to the bodice back on one side. To finish the bodice front, the lining fabric is placed right sides together over the gathered edge. The gathered up bodice top is sandwiched by the bridge main and lining. This time we will sew it with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Place snips along the curved edge to create a smooth finish. Turn this the correct way round and press this edge, checking you have no gathers as you go. You can see now all the raw edges are encased within our lining. At this point you can add that lining back the same as we did the main fabric with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Ensure you attach it to the same side you attached your main. Press both seams open. The top edge of the bodice front can be completed in 2 ways. I'll show you both. First, gathered up like the bottom edge. Run 2 straight stitches on a long stitch length from side to side in the seam allowance. Pull that down to the required length. Either measure your body and find the length you need to fit, or try it on. This is why we put the back on before finishing this step. Here is what the bodice looks like with a gathered top and gathered bottom. Lots of volume, very flexible, and you can slide these gathers to the area you need the most fabric ease. Once happy and done adjusting, secure it with another stitch on a regular setting sewn at 0.5 centimeters to lock this in place till later. Option 2, which is the one I personally prefer as I find it gives a more smooth and neat finish. First, we undo our previous gathering. You obviously won't require this step as you will go straight into the second method. As before, get your measurement for the end length of the top line of your bodice. Starting from the centre, you want to form even symmetrical pleats, working your way out till you have gone all the way across. You can even slightly angle these pleats to the shaping you need. I do encourage you to try it on and mess with it till you like the shape and volume. If you take a look at the original Marilyn dress, you'll see it's formed with lots and lots of tiny pleats and not gathered at all. If you like this really precise look, you could even replicate it on the bottom edge instead of gathering there. It would work just fine, and it's a personal choice. Again, once you're happy with how you've pinned it down to size, check it looks symmetrical from the centre point, then secure it with a permanent stitch along the top edge at 0.5 centimetres. The skirt again is flexible, so I won't go into too much detail. Option 1 is the quick and easy of gathered rectangles. Cut 2 rectangles at least 1.5 times the measurement of your bodice waistline and the length you want your skirt, plus 3 centimetres for the hem. The larger you make the width, the more dramatic the gathering will appear. Gather it down using 2 rows of long stitching like we did on the underbodice. Option 2 is closer to the original and is gathered tiers. As above, we will gather rectangles, but we will split it into 3 sections to make the length. And each tier will be larger than the previous, giving that full volume cone shape perfect for swirling. As we did in the bodice, you can replace any of the gathering with pleats for a less bulky look. Option 3 is the method I used. This is similar to option 2, dividing the length into 3 separate sections. However, there is a lot more shaping. The top tier has no gathers. I use my skirt block to trace off the top tier length and widen the sides to create an A-line shape. The advantage of this over option 2 is that you get less bulk around the hips and stomach area. If you don't want to add bulk and extra fabric in that area on your body, this is a smoother, streamlined option. It's more complicated and requires a skirt block, but it involves less fabric. From this point, we copy the gathers on each tier. I won't go into too much detail on the construction of the skirt, as it involved lots of elements seen in previous tutorials. I will attach the links to all below. To begin, I form the darts on the top layer. I added a seam pocket on one side. I used an overlocker to handle all raw seams on my skirt. On the other side, I added an inseam pocket with zipper. To make handling my garment easier, I attached a top tier of my skirt to the bodice, so I could insert the zipper prior to the added weight of the bottom tiers. To do this, I pin them right sides together along the waist seam, matching side seams and centre points. I sewed this with a 1 cm seam allowance. The seam was pressed up towards the bodice. Then I inserted the zipper on the side seam. Again, check out my tutorial on this technique for you to do this yourself. Each tier was made as a loop. The gathering or pleats are distributed evenly round the circle and then attached to the tier above. For the bottom tier, the hem is formed by folding under by 1 cm twice and sewing with a 1 cm seam allowance. I did this prior to attaching as it's easier to handle alone. So we have our bodice section with our top tier, then our larger central tier, and finally our bottom tier, which is larger again and hemmed. To complete the dress, we will be finishing the top edges using bias binding. First, we will apply it across the top edge of the body. Begin by folding it in two and pressing. You want a slight overlap on one side. This will be the inside, the side that will touch your body. Fold this around the top edge, and this covers all the basting and gathering stitches we put in earlier. Sew 1/8 inch from the edge of your bias binding, working from the right side of your garment. The overlap we made on the bias binding means we catch the larger side easier, that is underneath and not visible. Next, begin by leaving a section of bias tape long enough to go over your shoulder. I left 60 centimetres, so I had plenty of extra length to work. Attach and follow the border of the top of the dress all the way round to the other side. Once there, leave another length that will become our strap. At this point, hand sew the lining in place around the zipper and across the waist. The straps are formed from the excess bias binding we left. Sew them together to begin. I chose to do adjustable length straps, like you find on a bra. If you don't want to do this, simply try on the dress, set it to the length and stitch along your back to secure. For adjustable, cut 2 6 cm lengths of sewn bias. Thread a hoop on and sew in half. Attach where needed to the back of your dress. I like to sew in the bias binding line. Bring your strap from the front and thread on your tri-slider. Work this through your hoop from front to back. Then bring it through the top tri-slider hole from the back, out of the bottom hole. The excess is then folded under on itself and secured with a stitch. So here we have it, inspired by the Marilyn Monroe Polka Dot dress from the 1950s. This vintage inspired sundress is flirty and I could no longer get it on my mannequin as I don't have collapsible shoulders, but you can see here that tiered cone shape and full skirt. It's got an invisible side zipper and side seam pockets on both sides. You can make it with the pleats or gathered method as shown and any of the skirt options for a fully customisable dress. My name is Elfie Sew and I create sewing tutorials for all abilities. Please hit like if you have enjoyed today's video to support me, and if you want to see more, hit subscribe to be notified of new videos. Happy sewing!